Hello guys, welcome back to the MedLife. In this video, we are going to focus on diencephalon. So diencephalon is the relay sensory center of the brain. As you can see in this picture, it is located inferior to both cerebral hemispheres and in between them. It is composed of four major structures: the thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, and subthalamus. We will start with thalamus. So thalamus, this is the location of the thalamus. It's located inferior to the corpus callosum and also in the middle and in between of the two right and left cerebral hemispheres. And these are the nuclei of the thalamus. Thalamus is the sensory relay center of the brain, also like diencephalon, and it's one of the major structures found in the diencephalon. So if we look at the nuclei of the thalamus, they are a lot, and all of them perform different functions. So in this picture, you can see this gray Y-shaped structure over here is called the internal medullary lamina. It divides the thalamus into three major parts: the anterior, the medial, and the lateral. And this side is the posterior side. So if we look at all these nuclei located here individually, we will see that they all perform different functions. Let's start with the anterior nucleus. The anterior nucleus, if you can see in the other picture, is located in the anterior part of the thalamus. It's responsible for recent memory, emotions, behavior, and attention. So that's the major function of the anterior nucleus of the thalamus. If we go to the ventral posterolateral nucleus, as you can see, ventral posterolateral nucleus, so VPL. There's a mnemonic here, that VPL, very painful limb. As the name suggests, it receives the sensory information for pain, touch, temperature, vibration, and proprioceptions through all the spinal nerves, majorly from the limbs and other parts of the body. And the next nucleus is the ventral posteromedial nucleus. This one is VPM, ventral posteromedial, VPM, very painful mouth. So this one receives the sensory information for taste through the trigeminal nerve and some other cranial nerves, like some branches of facial nerve, like coda tympani, and branches of trigeminal nerve also. It receives the sensory information for that, for taste. So very painful mouth. Then the next nucleus is the ventrolateral and ventroanterior nucleus. These two nuclei perform motor function. They are the motor nuclei of the thalamus, and these are connected with the basal ganglia, and they work dependently with basal ganglia. The next nucleus is the interlaminar nuclei. These nuclei are located in different places in the thalamus, majorly deep inside the thalamus. And they stimulate the cerebral cortex for alerting the body. If there is some danger coming to the body, if some levels of some hormones are going high or something like that, it alerts the cerebral cortex to control that. And then the pulvinar. Pulvinar is the posterior nucleus of the thalamus. It receives the sensory information for visualizing. So basically, it receives some cranial nerves that are coming from the eye, from the orbit, and for visualizing. Then we have the two medial and lateral geniculate bodies. So the lateral geniculate body is responsible also for the production of visual reflexes and turning the head towards the sudden flash of light. So when you see a sudden flash of light on your right side, on left side, When you turn your head, or when you turn your eyes, it's this nucleus of the thalamus, lateral geniculate body, that is responsible for that sudden movement of the eye. And also when the light comes into the retina, it is the one that constricts the pupil of the eye, so the light directly doesn't go to the retina suddenly. And then the medial geniculate body is responsible for the sensory information through the cochlear nerve. You know, the cochlear nerve, it's one of the cranial nerves, the vestibulocochlear nerve. And this receives that information from that nerve, the cochlear part of the vestibulocochlear nerve, from the temporal lobe for auditory sensation. So for hearing sense, the sensory information of auditory sensation from the temporal lobe are referred to the medial geniculate body of the thalamus. This is another view of the thalamus. This is where it's located. Now the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is located inferior or below to the thalamus. In this structure, you can see this blue structure is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus structurally, and if you compare its weight, it's very it composed of like too many nuclei, but the weight is very less. It's not too much, but the function that it does, there are a lot. There are almost no part of the body that is not controlled by the hypothalamus. So as you can see here, the hypothalamus is a part of the diencephalon which lies below the thalamus, and it controls autonomic nervous system and also the endocrine system. So, and it's also included in the behavior and the emotions. It's divided into 4 major regions: the preoptic region, supraoptic, tuberal, and mammillary region. So the preoptic region is the adjoining the lamina terminalis. It lies anterior to the hypothalamus between the optic chiasma and the anterior commissure. The supraoptic region is the above the optic chiasma. These two, the preoptic and supraoptic regions, get their name because they are related to the optic chiasma. One of them is just before that, that's why it's called the preoptic, and the other one is above the optic chiasma, that's why it's called the supraoptic. Then the tuberal region includes the tuber cinereum, and infundibulum, and the area around there. Then the mammillary region includes the mammillary bodies and the area around the mammillary bodies. And these are the hypothalamic nuclei. In each different region, we have different nuclei. So in the preoptic region, we have only the preoptic nucleus. In supraoptic region, we have 3 nuclei: supraoptic, anterior, and paraventricular nucleus. In the tuberal, we also have 3: arcuate, ventromedial, and dorsomedial nuclei. And in mammillary, we have the mammillary nucleus and the posterior nucleus. Each of them is responsible for different functions, that we'll see later on. So here, the paraventricular and the supraoptic nuclei, they're responsible for regulation of water balance in the body. Then also there's some other functions. You can see hormonal, like hormones like oxytocin and ADH. And also the anterior nucleus is responsible for thermal regulation, for the controlling the heat in the human body. Then preoptic area, which contains a sexually dimorphic nucleus, and it regulates the gonadotropic hormones of the human body. Then different other nuclei that you see here, like the lateral nucleus, the stimulation induces eating. So eating disorders also are related to lesions of hypothalamus. Then we have the mammillary bodies that receive input from the hippocampal formation, biophonics, and other functions they perform. So these are the major nuclei of the thalamus. Also here you can see some from a superior view. So, functions of the hypothalamus, as we also said in some nuclei, they have autonomic functions which control both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So, as we know, the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight, which is responsible for when something goes high, levels of some hormones go high, and also the heart rate goes high. That's the sympathetic in abnormal conditions. Then parasympathetic is for rest and digestion. So when your body is at rest, you're not doing anything special, anything exciting. That's the parasympathetic nervous system. Then we have the endocrine control, which regulates the secretion of some hormones in the human body, especially by controlling the anterior pituitary gland. And then also neurosecretion, like secretes some neurohormones like oxytocin and vasopressin, and also ADH through the pituitary gland for controlling the sexual reproduction in the human body. Then we have the emotional expression and also food and water intake that we already talked about. Some nuclei are responsible for that. And then also sexual behavior and production by influencing secretion of gonadotropin hormones, which are done by the pituitary gland. Also temperature regulation, which is also the thermoregulation, and the biological clock of the body. So the next one, actually this is another picture of the hypothalamus. So the next structure of the diencephalon is the epithalamus. The epithalamus is also located below the thalamus, and it's majorly on the posterior surface. And it's composed of two major structures: the what you call the pineal gland or the pineal body, and the habenula. So the pineal gland or the pineal body is a neuroendocrine gland and consists of parenchymal cells. It secretes a hormone called melatonin. So pineal secretion include melatonin that have an ability to inhibit the effect of on the other endocrine glands and gonads. So it has the antigonadic effect on on the gonad in the human body, and yeah, that's the major function of the pineal gland, and it has some unique characteristics. So the pineal gland is the only part of the brain which has no neural tissue in it. So other parts of the brain you will find neural tissue in it, like cerebrum, cerebellum, and other parts of the nervous system. So this is in the brain. This is the only part that does not have neural tissue in it, and it's the only part of the brain which is supplied by a nerve, and which is called the nervus coronary, which arises from outside the brain. Yeah, it's supplied by a nerve which arises from outside the brain, from superior cervical sympathetic ganglion in the neck. So this is another view of the epithalamus, and this is the pineal body or the pineal gland. So the next structure is the subthalamus. The subthalamus, in this picture you can see it over here, is the region also below the thalamus. So the region below the thalamus and kind of dorsolateral to the thalamus. It continues caudally with the midbrain. So you can see it right over here. So this is the midbrain, and this is an inferior view of the brain. So this is the thalamus, and this is the subthalamus. So the subthalamus is a small nucleus, or the subthalamic nucleus, if you can call it. Is a small nucleus in the ventral part of the diencephalon, which looks like a biconvex lens in coronal section that we already seen, and it is located caudal to the lateral half of the thalamus and infromedial to the globus pallidus. It is separated from thalamus by a smaller nucleus called the zona incerta. So this is another view of the diencephalon. So we have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, subthalamus, and epithalamus. So this was the diencephalon.